It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
All right, Carlos has a question. He says, me and my wife are 25 and 24 and want to retire in 20 years.
Ooh.
I know, some ambition there. I like it. We have $100K invested in Roth 401k and Roth IRA and HSA and contribute $60K annually to max those out. Dang. Retirement calculators say I can retire at 45 with $2 million and withdraw $100K a year. Is this possible? And should I save less in a Roth IRA and more in a brokerage?
All right, I'm gonna read back. So, man, I was trying to feverishly take notes.
I can repeat some stuff because there was a lot of information in there.
They're 25 and 24. They want to retire in 20 years. They currently have $100,000 in Roth assets. They're saving $60,000 a year, all into Roth assets. A retirement calculator told them that they could retire at 45 with $2 million in the bank, pulling out $100,000 a year. Is that right?
That's right.
And so, what was the question?
The question is it possible to do that? Because he's kind of saying 2 million is like his number, theoretically.
Got it, okay.
So how do you know what your number is? And then also more specifically, should he save less in a Roth IRA and more in a brokerage account, like when he's thinking about getting to that number?
Carlos got good instincts.
Yeah, he does. He has really good instincts. Let me do the disclaimer because that's always a good one. It's really hard for us to give specific financial advice, Carlos, because we don't know all the unique intricacies of your situation. While you have told us a lot, we don't know you. So what we're going to share are kind of like, hey, here's some things to think about, and here's some things that maybe I would noodle on, and maybe some things that I would be wary of.
Yeah, I thought it's interesting because I won't draw attention to his name because I don't know because it's going to sound negative, but a lot of you will know who this is. A lot of the FIRE movement, and we have some content coming on this. I think you guys are going to absolutely love. There's an individual who did kind of exactly what you're talking about. He was a tech person. He built up, I think his build up was $3 million in assets, retired really early. It was either in his early 40s. But the rest of the story is he had to go back to work. And you're like, wait a minute, how did somebody who had $3 million, even had some passive income coming in from real estate, passive, I said, it cracks me up because it's not passive, but coming in, how did he have to go back to work? And the big thing, a 25 and a 24-year-old, the biggest thing that's going to work against you retiring at 45 is just a lot of life happens. I think when you retire at 65, your kids are already out of the house. You're probably in your forever home. So your life's kind of set. So now it's just what do the next 30 years look like? And that's why the Trinity study works so well. When you're 25 trying to figure out what 45 looks like, I can tell you 25-year-old Brian is completely different than 45-year-old Brian was. And my life was completely different because once you have kids, my story has changed, having a special needs child, it just completely turned things upside down because now the cost of education is just astronomically higher, the cost of all the treatments, as well as, now I have to save for not only my wife and I's retirement, I have to save for her retirement because she'll probably never be able to work. So that's why I always caution people when you're 25 and 24, I want you to plan like you're doing. You're doing great, by the way. Deferred gratification, you're kicking the crud out of it. You're doing really good on that. Just make sure you're also enjoying your 20s. I always want to challenge people to make sure you are going to look back in your 30s and 40s and go, man, we did the 20s right. So because I love all the savings and investing you're doing. But just be careful with thinking 2 million is it, because I just think that there's a lot of life. And that's why I would encourage you when we talk about FIRE and other things, keep some flexibility there, because I want you to be able to, when you get to 45, you have the choice. Now, hopefully you have built financial independence. That's that pull FI part of the FIRE movement, but you don't necessarily have to completely step out of the workforce. Maybe you just do things differently. That's why Barista FIRE and other things, you keep some ability to go out there and keep earning and making money. Because I don't know if I've given Carlos everything he needs. I just think that it's hard for a 25 and 24-year-old to know what they want life to look like when they're 46. Now, I want to set you up.
All right.
He asked about liquidity, though, because after tax, you're so good at telling people on that 3-bucket strategy, because Roth, we love it, tax-free growth, but if he's retiring at 45, he probably is going to need access to some money earlier than what he can pull out of that Roth.
Yeah, there are three things that I kind of wrote down as my, hey, Carlos, I would check into this stuff. Access to funds is one of them, right? If you're putting all your money in Roth, the way that Roth is supposed to work is before you're able to access that money, you need to be 59 and a half, and you need to be, the account has to have been open for 5 years in order to draw it completely tax-free. Now, there are tax-free and penalty-free. Now, there are some rules around that where you can get to your basis, which that gets kind of interesting, right? Like if you think about a 20-year runway, how much of your account is actually contributions basis and how much of your account is actually earnings? You got to think through, if I got to get money to bridge me from 45 until 59 and a half, do I have enough contributions in there at 100 grand a year, if that's what I need, to be able to do that? So you might need to start thinking about, do I need to have different tax buckets instead of just all having Roth? Should I have my other tax buckets? I would also throw out there, if you're an individual or a couple that can save $60,000 a year, that tells me one of two things. Either you are a high income, higher tax bracket family, or you have mastered minimalism. Maybe you're not necessarily higher income, but you just save a buttload of money. If you happen to be in the higher income camp, I would really start thinking through, okay, might I be able to save more dollars if I were to put money into the pre-tax bucket, save taxes on that, and begin building up an after-tax bucket with the tax savings? That's sort of an idea to think about based on where you fall from a tax bracket standpoint. If you're over 30%, between your effective federal, or between your marginal federal and state, you might want to look at pre-tax. If you're under 25%, then Roth makes a lot of sense. If you're saving $60,000 a year, that makes me think that perhaps you're in one of the higher tax bracket places. Here's the last thing that I'll throw out there. Brian, we have a show coming up in the very near future talking about the FIRE movement, right? And we've been doing some research and working on this. Now, I don't do public math, so I got my calculator out. So I think I calculated this right. If you have $2 million at 45 and you want to pull out $100,000 a year, that's a 5% withdrawal rate. Ooh. Is that good math, right? Well, here's what's really, really interesting. You may be saying, okay, 5% is fine. Well, when you think about that and you think about the Trinity study, and the Trinity study was actually more of a 4% number than a 5% number, it was thinking about like normal retirement at age 65 going all the way until actual, end of life at like 95. So you're looking at like this 30-year horizon. If we're living longer and we're retiring earlier, that means that our dollars have to last a lot longer. And I think Trinity even redid the study, not just looking at 30 years, but looking at 50 years. It changes what an actual sustainable safe withdrawal rate is. So as your retirement date shrinks or comes closer, you also kind of need to be thinking about, do I need to be changing my safe withdrawal rate? So I don't know, without doing the numbers, running through the stress test, analyzing it, if a 5% withdrawal rate is sustainable for somebody at 45 with a specific type of account structure. Perhaps it is, perhaps it isn't. I know that I would really want to think through that a lot before I signed off, saying, okay, yeah, this is something that makes sense.
That sounds very aggressive.
But I
think,
aggressive.
Look, you're not going to lose with the amount of money you're saving. It's just that you're not going to be assured of financial independence until you get a lot closer to the goal of your 40s. And that's why I'll just close it out with, hey, just make sure you stress test it. Don't leave your high-paying job, all the things, until you've measured twice. Really run this thing beyond just doing a simple with safe withdrawal rate, because I think safe withdrawal rates are great for a 20-something or a 30-something, even a 40-something who's retiring more of a normal age. Because when you have over a decade until you retire, napkin planning works.
That's
it's
right.
great because it keeps you motivated, gives you some barometer of where you are. But as you get closer to actually living off this money and you need to stress test it, you need to know, hey, where does it fall into because of just maybe what's going on in the economy on the day I stop working and living off of it. That type of stuff it needs to be taken into account. And that's what I would, Carlos, I would just make sure you do the exercise. But still 20 years out, just keep doing what you're doing and just enjoy the fun, because you're basically living the life of why. I'm not a big lottery player, but it's one of the things I always tell people whenever we did like pools of the office doing lottery tickets. My fun was daydreaming about what I would do if I won. Somebody who's saving like Carlos and his spouse are doing, they are going to win the life lottery. So it's fun to go ahead and start having date nights and daydreaming about how you want to spend your success and be purposeful with what you're doing, maybe even making the world a better place. do all that stuff, but just know it's probably going to change by the time you get into your 40s.